Today's presentation will be on the topic different aspects of social linguistics. So the content of my presentation has been divided into 13. These are the contents. Social linguistics and brief overview of social linguistics and difference of social linguistics, of language, varieties, and so on. So the first, what is social linguistics? So we all know that language is one of the most important tools of socialization that exists in human society and culture, wherein myths, beliefs, and social customs are passed on to generation by means of language. So language determines the culture and ethnicity of an individual, and any member of a society can understand the structure of a society by the use of language, through language. And that is why the social aspect of language is studied by social linguistics. And social linguistics is the descriptive study of the effect of the aspect of how language is used and the effect of language on society. And then social linguistics examines how language and society have interacted in the past. Why? Because language is variable and ever-changing. And socio stands for pertaining to society, and linguistics stands for pertaining to language. This is a brief overview of social linguistics. Social aspects of language. It was first studied by Indian and Japanese linguists in 1930s. And also by Rochat in Switzerland in the early 1900s. And then the study of social motivation of language change begins in the early 19th century. The term social linguistics was first used by Thomas Colin Hudson in his article Social Linguistics in India, 1939. Social linguistics was first, the Western social linguistics was first pioneered by William Labov in the US and Basil Palestine in the UK in the 1960s. So there are three tools in order to understand social linguistics, and these are the three tools. First is all language events consist of a piece of language's social context, and the particular form of language is determined by every different social context. And the third tool to understand social linguistics is that the nature of the social event is determined by language use in particular situations. And in addition to the three tools that has been mentioned, there are variables in social linguistics that we need to understand as well. So it is social variable and linguistics variable. Social variable is the social factors that determines language variation, and then linguistics variable, the linguistics feature to determine the variation is language, dialect, style, register, pronunciation, etc. And there is a difference between social linguistics and sociology of language. So Hudson has defined social linguistics as the study of language in society, whereas the sociology of language is the study of society in relation to language. And sociology of language, it seeks to understand the way that social dynamics are affected, how social dynamics are affected by individual or groups, the use of language used by groups or an individual in social settings. So it determines who is authorized to use a type of language and when, and then under what condition a language differs. So social linguistics studies the language, the context of language used to know more about the language, whereas sociology of language study language used to know more about society. Here I want to say that the goals of social linguistics and sociology of language are different. Because a social linguist would refrain from drawing a conclusion about a society, whereas a sociologist would differ or would refrain themselves from discovering language, from discovering things that is related to language. So, yes, sociologists and sociologists and social linguists, they differ. They differ based on their emphasis on the context that they want to study. And I will also talk about the varieties of language. Variety is defined in terms of the different human speech patterns associated with external factors like geographical area or a social group. And then varieties can be classified on the basis of 3 types. Number 1 is uses, 2 is use, and 3rd is the social relation. And language variety, it indicates the speaker's origin or aspects of their social identity. Social identity means the class and the ethnicity, but then they carry certain social values related to the speaker. Users is language, studies the language variation based on its users, and use is the study of language variation based on its use, and then social relation is the study of the variation based on social relationship among speakers. So, dialect and accent. Dialect and accent here. Dialect refers to the language variation that comes from a group of users that are relative in numbers within one. So that's what Cher and Augustina said. And then dialect is related to variation, which can be of regional dialect and social dialect. Regional dialect is based on the place, region, or area where the users live, which means that it is spoken in one part of a country based on region variation, based on region. And then the variation can be distinguished by their pronunciation and thereby by their grammatical differences. And then in social context, it's based on social status or class of the users, which means that it is spoken by a group of people belonging to a particular social group. And in accents are variable and universal, and there are the differences in pronunciation between speakers of a language determine the different accents in a language. And then the accents can also be studied. It can also be studied through the use of, it is a part of phonology. It is a part of phonology which provides scientific and objective means of discussing accents in the form of IPA. And then we have registers and style. The term register refers to the varieties based on occupation characterized by variation in lexicon. According to Halliday, there are 3 variables, that is field, tenor, and mode of discourse, to determine registers. Field is the subject matter or the topic of the discourse, and tenor is the relationship. In field, say, for example, the field of science. So in a given classroom setting, if we have to take the field of subject matter, science in biology, says in field of science, so in a given classroom setting, if a teacher has to teach science, the particular subject that he or she would pick up, say for example, if it's biology, the tenor would be that of the teacher and that student, and the mode of communication might be oral, which would mean lecturing, and then it can either be written or spoken. Styles refers to variation within registers that can represent individual choice along with social dimensions. And Juice, 1961, has suggested 5 styles in spoken English based on the scale of phonology. One is frozen, which would mean the written form which cannot be changed, and then the formal scale, which is the one-way participation, which would include without interruption, And then there is consultative, which is two-way participation and interruption is expected. And casual is between groups, friends, where interruption is common. And intimate is between a very close relationship between two people, which is non-public, and where intonation is more important than focusing on the grammar. And then there are other varieties, which is standard and non-standard varieties. The standard varieties is the variety used in the media for education for official purposes, and it is recognized by the society, whereas non-standard varieties is considered not recognized. And then there is native and non-native varieties. The native variety is the variety which is acquired by a speaker from their childhood in natural setting, and non-native varieties is where a child learn a language as a second language and not the first language. And then the speech community. So the speech community is derived from German. The word Sprachgemeinschaft, which is often used by sociologists to refer to a community based on language. And speech community is a concept in linguistics that describes a discrete group of people who use language in a unique and mutually accepted way amongst themselves. So speech community can be a member of a profession with a specialized jargon, and then a kind of speech spoken in a distinct social group, say college students, families, and amongst colleagues as well. And then John Lyons has described speech community as all the people who use a given language or dialect. So in speech community, the ways of speaking can vary remarkably from one culture to another. And say, for example, it's the switching of identity given in different community. So, for example, the way I speak at my home will be different with the kind of language that I talk in the classroom. I might talk with my local dialect at home, but then with my colleagues I'll talk in English. So as such, our identity differs with the type of social settings that we are provided with. And then ethnography of communication. Hines has proposed an ethnographic model to consider the various factors involved in speaking. Number one is he has divided into the acronym S speaking, S-P-E-A-K-I-N-G. In S, it stands for setting and scene, which refers to the time and place where conversation or speech takes place. So it refers to this physical condition in which speech takes place. And P stands for participants. Participants are simply those who take part in a speech. So there would be a speaker and a listener, and then a sender and a receiver. And then E stands for ends. Ends refers to the purpose, goals, and outcomes of an exchange. So goals can either be personal or social. And X sequence refers to the form and content of the event. So it stands for what is said, and then how words are identified during communication. And K stands for key refers to the tone, manner, or spirit in which a particular message is conveyed. So the key would either be serious or it might be sarcastic, and then it also includes non-verbal gesture. And I, instrumentalities, refers to the mode of communication where it can either be oral, written, and the form of speech employed, such as the language, dialect, or the register which is chosen for communication. N stands for norms of interaction. refers to social rules governing the event and participants' action and reaction. So norms of interaction would be the scale of loudness or silence. Say, for example, in church, we maintain silence when the speaker gives their sermon. And then, meanwhile, in concert, we do not maintain the kind of silence we maintain in that of the church. So that includes the category of norms of interaction. And G stands for genre, which refers to the clearly demarcated types of utterances. So it might be poetry, or it might be prayers and lectures. And then we have dialogia. It is a term coined by Charles A. Ferguson in 1959. He defined dialogia as a situation in which two varieties of language exist side by side throughout a community, with each variety having a definite role to play. And then he has explained dialogia under 9 rubrics. In function, he divides it into 2 distinct varieties, which is the high variety and the low variety. So high variety are those types of language which is spoken in a kind of formal casualty, and then the low variety is that of, say, the language which is directed to servants, and the language which is directed to laborers. And then high variety of language also includes the university lectures given in university, and then low variety of language are those languages used in families or amongst friends. And then in prestige, it's the diagnostic community which considers the high variety as superior and the low variety as the inferior. And in literary heritage, it's the diagnosia community considers the written literature of the high variety as respected by the speech community, and that the low variety as a continuation of the great tradition which is followed by from the high variety of language. And then accusation is in accusation, the diagnosia community has systemized the low variety as spoken by that of the child in natural settings at home, and then the high variety as the type of language spoken by a child at school. And then standardization here, the high variety of language is recorded in grammar and then in dictionaries, and then the lower type of variety is not recorded according to the diagnosia community. So the stability is the development of mixed form of language in which features of both the varieties are available. So the high variety and the low variety is common, but changing from a low variety to high variety is not common at all. And then grammar is where the diagnosia community, they consider the grammar of the high variety, consider the high variety as superior and the grammar of low variety as simpler than that of the high variety. And then lexicon is the vocabulary that diffuses from the high variety to the low variety. Language content. Language content occurs in a variety of phenomena, which includes borrowing, mixing, and switching.
You have completed 20 minutes. I give you 3 minutes more.
Yes, sir. For pigeon and crows, I think that all of us do know about pigeon and crows. So the continued contact between crow and prestige language may result to decriolization. Decriolization is when a crow begin to closely resemble the prestige language. Prestige language is the standard language which is accepted by the society or organization. And then crow continuum is of 3. Crow continuum social linguistics is interested in. Number one is the effect of social factors on language varieties, and then number two is how different people with linguistics variation, how they communicate in a social setting. And then the third is how we communicate to understand. And then this one. So here in this example, I'm going to highlight the different language attitude in different situations. In example one, the use of blasted idiots when the husband knew that the baby was here is not appropriate in the kind of settings that they were communicating. So one must be able to understand where he or she speaks, and then who are his audience, who are his or her audience. And in example two, the type of formality which is presented in example two cannot be used in amongst friends. But then the conversation is between a salesperson and a customer, which is quite formal in setting, and then such type of conversation will not be applicable to when we speak with our friends. And in conclusion, the study of language in a social context tells us quite a bit about how we organize our social relationship with a particular community. And then grammar alone will not suffice our conversation, but since language has culture attached, has the elements of culture attached to it, we need to understand the mechanics. We need to understand the context.